Helen was a bus driver, and every day she went about town in circles. The thing about Helen was that she never quite got her routes right. She arrived second at the third stop, first at the second stop, and third at the first stop. Her route had over 30 stops, so you can imagine how busy of a sentence I could write if I were to describe just one of her workdays. Nevertheless, if you were ever to climb up the steps of her bus, you would be sure to arrive at your stop in time, even if she happened to be going in the complete opposite direction. In fact, it is more likely that you end up where you're supposed to whenever Helen is driving in the wrong direction. However, today was a bit different, because when she made her first stop, she found that her surroundings were entirely unfamiliar. For the first time in a while, her stop was not in her schedule at all. And yet, a passenger was there waiting for her. We, as narrator and audience, are very much aware that something new has been happening recently, that some hedges have been growing wild at the top of a particular mountain. That is to say that the divergence just described in Helen's schedule had everything to do with the vines crawling up the bus stop sign, and nothing to do with a change in her own disposition. As a matter of fact, her current disposition was rather perfect for this particular happening. There was once a time when Helen's life was nothing but frustration and unexpected divergences. Her days were glued together by a series of constant stumbles over low furniture, missed appointments, forgetfulness towards hydration, lunch, breakfast, and dinner, as well as a bad relationship with calendars and alarm clocks. In navigating life, she did acquire some useful reflexes that considerably delayed her impending demise by tripping over anything and everything. However, she still felt quite unfit for the world around her, and yet the truth was that conversely, the world was rather unfit to accommodate her. It is a very difficult thing to fathom being adequate when no evidence of it surrounds you. In earnest, one can only find such evidence by looking within. And within Helen there was a confused woman with purple bruises on her ankles, arms, and legs. She wore a broken watch and clutched the scraps of a map. After the world bruised up her ankles and left her hurting in confusion, Helen had attempted to fix the wrongness of this woman within her. What she did was fix the woman's watch, so now it could only tell time in the normal cycles of 12 hours. She then fixed the woman's map, ripping off every section that did not fit within north, south, east, and west. And yet, she still wore bruises anew. When looking within, Helen had to reckon with the reality that by attempting to fix herself, she broke her only ways to navigate and understand the world. The biggest tragedy had been believing that the world had power over her. It was only by convincement that the world could reach within. And it came a time when Helen stopped being convinced of her wrongness and gave herself the license to heal. Nowadays, it might be difficult for others to fathom Helen's ways, but not for her, not anymore. Her maps go into impossible places, and her days vary from 8 hours to 36 hours. For Helen, the right direction is always quite evident, and today, the right direction was definitely not by this new bus stop. Nevertheless, her passenger seemed quite unbothered. She gave Helen a ginger good morning, sat near the front, and raised the volume of her headphones, and by doing so completely missed the flabbergasted look on Helen's face. Fortunately, Helen no longer possessed any reflexes related to pretending things were fine and attempting to act any kind of normal. So she promptly waved her arms at Lisa, her passenger, and informed her that she had absolutely no idea where she was, even though she was supposedly the one driving. Curiously, this wasn't a huge problem for Lisa. As she was in the process of running away from certain aspects of her life, she didn't care where the bus was headed. But the amount of social interaction required to explain her own situation was a quite tiresome proposition, so she simply thanked Helen for the warning and left. Helen double-checked her schedule and drove away. Unfortunately, a way led her right back to the same street by the same bus stop. And this time, Lisa was quick to notice the confusion on Helen's face because she wore a confused look of her own. Helen then tried to drive away a couple more times, but alas, it seemed she was stuck in a weird sort of geographical loop. Lisa then joined Helen in an attempt to help navigate the neighborhood, since Helen seemed terribly in need of the input from a local. Together, they were able to drive away, but their destination ended up being a new bus stop in a neighborhood unknown to either of them, where another confused passenger was waiting. This repeated several more times until the bus was almost full and they finally hit their final stop. This bus stop was waiting in a corridor of hedges. Once, it had been a lovely curiosity for lost hikers, but with Helen's arrival, a convenient road became its companion. It was the first stop empty of passengers, and so Helen drove right past it towards the manor house at the horizon. The roads were quite narrow with less than agreeable turns, and yet Helen felt no difficulty navigating. The passengers, on the other hand, were all sorts of vexed about the impossibilities of this journey. But driving through many bus stops in places she had never even heard of, only to end up in a garden of some rich fellow's countryside home, had been amongst one of the many things that happened during her first week at the job. So it would take more than that to vex Helen. However, one thing did vex Helen. Something felt wrong, or perhaps new. Indeed, she was experiencing something that she had never once experienced before. Despite all her efforts to heal and accept herself, there was one thing she had never been able to change. You see, living life her way was often an unintended act of defiance. It was seldom her intention to go against the grain, but more often than not, there was the consequence of her just being herself. It always felt like she was going up a hill while everyone else was going down it, and yet trying to do things like everyone else was exhausting all the same, just in a more painful way. It seemed impossible to simply live. And even so, looking around at the maze, she realized that today, she wasn't the one challenging geography. That today, geography seemed challenged all by itself. It was true that everywhere had been turned upside down, but for the first time, her world felt right side up. And like magic, Helen turned the steering wheel to the right, which used to result in her going left, but this time, she simply went right. Final stop, everyone. We have arrived at the HedgeMaze Hotel.